So how are we going to compare the new Apple iPad mini Retina? Of course, we could use the previous version of the Apple iPad mini, which didn't come with a Retina display. So this was an ordinary 1024 by 768, and it was also a little bit lighter. It was a little bit thinner, and it had a longer battery life, which is kind of reasonable because, I mean, we have to kind of move so many pixels on the new mini Retina. Plus, on top of it, compared to the ordinary or the previous iPad mini, it has a much bigger battery. So this is, in terms of the capacity, this is like 16.3 watt hours, and we have over here 24.3 watt hours. So an additional 8 watt hours, but still it's kind of lacking a little bit the battery life of the original iPad. But besides that, you know what? Let's not compare it to the previous generation. And you know what? We can also compare it maybe to the new Apple iPad Air, which in my opinion is quite interesting. To be honest, I think the iPad Air kind of reanimated the 10-inch tablet category again. It's a gorgeous device. It is so light. This is like roughly about 120 grams heavier than the iPad mini Retina. It also sports the amazing Apple A6 64-bit SoC, and therefore, you know what? I'm not sure if the Apple iPad mini Retina will cannibalize the sales of the iPad Air like the original iPad mini did with the iPad 4. I think about like 70-75% of all the tablet sales after the iPad mini got launched and the iPad 4 were going into the iPad mini camp. So you know what, that's quite difficult here to really say. Am I becoming a 10-inch person again, or am I going to stay with an ultra mobile one as the iPad mini? But let's talk about some competitors that are not from Apple. Well, so therefore, let's get rid of the Air and let's switch over here to the Nexus 7. This is the 2013 version, and yeah, that's quite interesting. Over here we have the Kindle Fire HDX 7. Very, very interesting device. So let's talk a little bit about specifications. So let me just move it down a little bit and let's take a look. Well, first of all, they are all somehow in the 7-inch category. We have two traditional 7 inches. That's the Kindle Fire HDX 7 and the Nexus 7 2013 over there. 7-inch displays, resolution of 1920 by 1200, while the Apple iPad mini comes with a 7.9-inch display and a resolution of 2048 by 1536. So this is the so-called Retina display, which is not describing any technology. It's basically a marketing term from Apple. When it comes to the SoCs and the processors and the GPUs, you know, there's also quite a difference over here. Over here on the right side, we have the so-called Qualcomm Snapdragon S4 Pro, which is basically a Qualcomm Snapdragon 600, but Qualcomm just kind of renamed it. It's running at a lower clock speed than the original Qualcomm Snapdragon 600, and therefore it comes also with the Adreno 320 GPU. On the Kindle Fire HDX 7, we have a Qualcomm Snapdragon 800, and that means we're getting also, of course, the quiet architecture, but the Adreno 330 GPU, one of the fastest processors that's available, and basically the fastest processor that is available for Android device in these days, well, next to the Tiger 4 from NVIDIA, of course. And in the middle, well, we have this kind of infamous Apple A7, the very first 64-bit SoC that finally made it to a consumer platform. And this one is a dual-core processor. It's only running at 1.3 gigahertz. Once again, we have quad cores over here, 1.5 gigahertz, and that's a 2.2 gigahertz here. But it still has a huge performance, and it comes also with the PowerVR G6430 GPU. In terms of memory, we have 1 gigabyte of RAM over here. We have 2 gigabytes of RAM here on the Nexus, and we have 2 gigabytes of RAM on the Kindle Fire HDX 7. When it comes to the weight of these devices, they are also very similar. We have 299 grams on the Nexus 7 over here. We have 341 grams, slightly heavier, on the new Apple iPad mini Retina, and 311 grams on the Kindle Fire HDX 7. I would love to show you how thin or how thick they are. So that's 9 millimeters here on the Kindle Fire, and we have 8.65 millimeters here on the Nexus 7, and 7.5 like the iPad Air on the new iPad mini Retina. When it comes to the cameras, which seems to be quite important for people on tablets, let's say more in the 7-inch category, because it looks kind of weird when you're using a 10-inch tablet and you're making pictures. There are also quite some differences. So in general, we have 5 megapixel on the Nexus 7 and on the Apple iPad mini Retina, and there is no camera on the back of the Kindle Fire HDX 7. But it comes with a front-facing camera, and that's a 1.2 megapixel one here on the Kindle Fire. And we have a 1.2 megapixel on the iPad mini Retina and a 1.2 megapixel on the Nexus 7.